The FIFA World Cup comes together once every 4 years, but what if we did the same thing for literature? I've selected these 48 countries that are following alongside the FIFA World Cup to compete in our very own Literature World Cup. With this worldwide phenomenon going on, I figured this would be a fun idea so that not only you can follow the World Cup and be a part of the conversation, but have a little incentive baked in. So we're going to get to that here soon. There will be probably some debate in regards to who I'm selecting to be the representative or the stand-in for said country. So to help guide that process, the first criteria that I used was if there is a Nobel Prize winner from that country, they will most likely be the stand-in. And then if there are multiple, like for the United States, for example, there's going to be some bias baked in as well. So again, I fully encourage some honest, charitable debate and disagreement as to why you think this person is or is not a good representative or person to carry the flag for your country. And lastly, before diving in, I have baked in 2 side games. So if you typically do not care about sports and you're a fan of this channel, you know that we talk about books. And so this is a way for FIFA lovers or soccer lovers and book lovers to come under one roof and have a shared vision ahead. And so the first of which is going to be whichever country ends up winning the FIFA World Cup on July 19th, we are going to be reading that author's most prolific or famous work. So for example, if Colombia were to win, we would be reading 100 Years of Solitude. Now that's one giveaway. I don't want to give away too much, but the idea is going to be that we read a work from that nation. Now the fun part of this is if an underdog wins, one of these countries that is maybe a first timer to the World Cup, it's going to open up our eyes to maybe some other cultural stories that we otherwise would not be privy to. And that's one of the beauties of the World Cup. I think this is a way that we can all hold hands under the guise of sports and be one team. And then 2 is I want to see which of you scores the highest. And what I mean by scores the highest is as we're going through these 48 authors, we're going to keep a tally as to how many you know and how many you don't know. I would be shocked if I knew more than 10 of these, to be honest, because this is truly across the globe, 48 countries. So keep a tally of how many you know. As the World Cup is evolving, it's expanding, and we are continuing to follow the World Cup, there's this baked in incentive of whoever wins, we're going to be reading one of their works. Because we have 48 teams, there will be 12 groups of 4 in this video. The first group, Group A, which we're going to go ahead and dive into now, is comprised of Mexico, South Africa, South Korea, and Czechia. So starting out, Mexico, our representative for Mexico is going to be Octavio Paz. Kicking it off with Octavio Paz, he has actually won the Nobel Prize for Mexico, or for literature in Mexico. He has also won the Cervantes Prize, which is the highest praise for any Spanish-speaking author. It says he is the winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature because he explored love, solitude, and Mexican identity with lyrical precision and philosophical depth. If you are from Mexico, do let me know if you think that Paz is a good stand-in. Apparently, he studied law and literature at the University of Mexico, and in his early years, being in the Republic of Spain during the Civil War, these encounters helped shape his imagination and his lyrical prose. Paz's career moved through phases of Marxist and Surrealist influence to philosophical and Eastern philosophical literature. One of his more famous works is The Labyrinth of Solitude. I have not read it. I have heard of Octavio Paz, so go ahead and put 1 in the tally for me in authors that I know. Let me know if you've heard them. And again, let's keep a running tally of how many you know so we can see at the end how many collectively we know together. All right, moving on in Group A, we're going to jump over to South Africa, and we have J.M. Coetzee for the representative of South Africa. And again, off the bat, we already have a Nobel Prize winner. And so, as we said, if there is a Nobel Prize winner, we're going to go ahead and put him in there. So Coetzee actually won the Nobel Prize in 2003. A lot of his writing is focused around colonialism and moral responsibility. He's well known for Life and Times of Michael Kay, which was his first Booker Prize winner, and then Disgrace. He talks a lot about post-apartheid themes. And again, this is one of the beauties of the World Cup or such a national event like this, because we become introduced into themes, topics, injustices or justices around the globe that we otherwise would not even think about. So, for example, if South Africa did win the World Cup, it would be very intriguing to read about post-apartheid South Africa. Group A's third representative is going to be one of the more contemporary representatives. I've certainly heard of her. And so for South Korea's representative is going to be none other than Han Kong. I hope I'm pronouncing that wrong, or right, rather. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Do let me know if that's correct or not. But I've certainly heard of her. She just won, I think, in 2024. Let's look over here. Hong Kong won the Nobel Prize. In 2024, she was the first South Korean to win the Nobel Prize, and she is largely regarded for her recent work, The Vegetarian, but she's also known for her other work, Human Acts. And also, it's good to see some female representation already on this board. It's interesting to see that Han was actually raised in a literary family, and her father was a novelist. I also see that Hong Kong was raised or moved from Gwangju to Seoul shortly before 1980 because of the Gwangju Uprising, which was an event that profoundly shaped her moral imagination. Again, themes and cultural tragedies or calamities like this, if South Korea were to win, very interesting to dive into. All right, moving on. Our last country in Group A is going to be Czechia. And now we have a heavyweight off the bat, not to discredit or diminish any of these people, but we certainly know this author if you've been in the literary space. Drop it if you know it. If not, here it is. It's going to be Franz Kafka. Now, Kafka is so synonymous with literature that we even have a term that is called... That was my headphones. We even have a term, and that term is Kafka-esque. And this is all about the absurdist literature and the psychological, just his imaginative, ruminative writing style. So technically, he was born in Prague, but later moved to Germany. So could be a contentious debate here. But since he was born in Czechia, similarly to a lot of these World Cup soccer or football players, a lot of times they decide to represent the country that they were born in. And so famous works by Kafka, there are so many, but one that I actually read this year is Metamorphoses. There's, of course, The Trial, which apparently the first sentence in that is one of the most famous sentences in literature. So it would be interesting if Czechia won to read The Trial or The Castle. What I find interesting, and if you've read Metamorphosis, you will probably know this, but he worked in insurance until he got tuberculosis. And Metamorphosis is all about the story of a man essentially losing his facility and being compared to a bug because he's this breadwinner and he's this provider for his family. And all of a sudden, his social status is just diminished. And I actually did not know that Franz Kafka got tuberculosis. So interesting to see that. I suppose the strain that he went through in his own life was representative in his novels as well. All right, moving on. That is Group A, guys. Group A. Let me know what you think about Group A so far. Again, there are 12 groupings that we're going through due to the 48 different teams. So 12 groups of 4. And moving on to Group B. And so starting off with Canada, this could be a contentious topic or maybe one that stirs debate. I thought about putting Margaret Atwood here because of The Handmaid's Tale and how notorious that is in the book space and how many people have read it. However, looking at the Nobel Prize and using that as our litmus test, or rather our criteria to start with, we do have one other person, and that is going to be Alice Munro. And Alice Munro apparently was the first Canadian woman to receive the Nobel Prize, and she got it in 2013, so still pretty recent in history here. It says her debut collection of Dance of the Happy Shades earned immediate acclaim. It seems like her short stories are largely based off a fictional Ontario, and a lot of her themes are reminiscent of Chekhov's writing. I truly know nothing about Alice Munro, but if you are Canadian, Ryan, I'm looking at you, or anybody else maybe watching this video, let me know if you think Alice is a good stand-in, or maybe who else should be the representative for Canada. Quick tangent, going to the World Cup. If you don't know, Canada, Mexico, and the United States are actually the host countries, and so all of these events are taking place in North America. Moving on, our second country in Group B is going to be Bosnia. And for Bosnia, I have selected Ivo Andrić. And again, going back to the Nobel Prize, he won it in 1961, and so that is why we are selecting him. He is most known for the bridge on the Drina, and apparently his writing style mostly explores the intertwined histories of faith, the culture of Bosnia and the Balkans, and reflects on human destiny amid historical upheaval. As a youth, he joined the nationalist group Mlada Bosna, whose activities paralleled the rise of the South Slavic independence movements. Apparently, he was actually arrested during World War I for being anti-Austrian, and wrote his first lyrical prose, the Ex Ponto, as he was imprisoned. So again, just really interesting stuff here. I mean, he's going against this governing body, or at least the large thought what was perceived as the correct way of being. And so all these different idiosyncratic cultural events that are happening, and how I at least am not familiar with, I think is one of the captivating things about literature. The Nobel Prize, if you don't know, is the distinction of an author saying that their entire body of work, not just one particular work, but their entire body of work, is indicative of being awarded. Moving on to Qatar. Now, this was a rather interesting one for me. I honestly couldn't even tell you where Qatar is on a map, so I'm just going off the research here. And apparently one of Qatar's most internationally recognized novelists is Abdulaziz Al-Mahmoud. And the representative book apparently that is most known by him is The Corsair. He's especially known also for The Holy Sail. Basically his works combine meticulous research. He writes a lot about British imperial forces and Arabian tribes, again recentering on Arab voices in maritime history previously told through colonial narratives. So seeing that mashup of colonialism and the British imperial forces combined with the distinction of creating one's own nation and opposing this colonial rule would be an interesting topic to explore for sure. His imagination, faith, and writings of revenge and cultural coexistence depict this journalistic style in his writing as well. So you can expect to see that in Al-Mahmoud's writing. All right, so that is going to be our third in Group B, taking us to our final country, which is Switzerland. And I'm actually recording this video the first weekend or the kickoff of the World Cup, and Switzerland and Qatar actually just played each other and tied. And this was major for Qatar because you have this new country just coming out of colonialism and they tied. And it's just exciting to see these underdog stories, not only in present, but also potentially in this, right? Because if a country like Qatar were to win, we would learn about Abdulaziz and the prior British rule, and how the civilians or the natives of Qatar are having these opposing ideas. So anyway, just really cool to see them out on the pitch or out on the soccer field and going head to head and actually coming to a draw. Very cool. Anyway, Group B, rounding off Switzerland. For Switzerland, we have Hermann Hesse. This is one I have certainly heard of. Hermann Hesse, let me know where the tally's at. I really don't know because I'm just talking to you guys, but Hermann Hesse, he was awarded the Nobel Prize back in 1946. Obviously, it's quite a time ago, but he's very well known for not only Siddhartha, but Steppenwolf, as well as the glass bead game. So Hesse was actually born into a family of missionaries and scholars with deep ties to India, which makes sense being the Swiss guy talking about a religious topic such as Siddhartha. And so later in life, his travels to Italy and Asia himself exposed him to Buddhism and Indian philosophy, which profoundly shaped Siddhartha. And during World War I, he denounced militarism and moved to neutral Switzerland and underwent Jungian psychoanalysis. So this guy was certainly about not only self-discovery, but also playing a neutral field and not believing in military conflict. Definitely Switzerland is widely regarded as, the neutral country whenever it comes to the world wars. And so Hermann Hesse, a lot of us have heard of him, but if you have not, and Switzerland somehow wins the World Cup, we could be reading Siddhartha or Steppenwolf. Moving on to our third group. Third group is going to be comprised of Brazil, Morocco, Haiti, and Scotland. So these are going to be our four groups. And interesting enough, as we dive into Brazil, I did some research prior to this and actually could not believe that Brazil did not have a Nobel Prize winner. I feel like Brazil's such a large country, obviously from a population standpoint, but I feel like they're pretty widely regarded in the literature space as well. Not that I have read much of their works, but you hear about Brazil. But from a contemporary lens, and being that I am a United States citizen, and this author, you walk into most people's house that have books on their shelves, and I feel like you see this author, which is why I have selected this author. It could be a contentious topic. If you're from Brazil or just think that this author's whack, do let me know. But I am selecting Paulo Coelho. And Paulo Coelho is most known, of course, for The Alchemist. And this is all about a pilgrimage and finding one's destiny. Now, for Paulo Coelho, of course, we already mentioned he did not win the Nobel Prize. But due to the global phenomenon that The Alchemist is and selling millions and millions of copies worldwide, this is why we are going to select this. I think what's interesting about Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist that I did not know, and maybe this is news to you, is that he actually went on a voyage in the 1980s. He went to Spain to hike the Camino de Santiago, which is a long meandering hike, and this was his pilgrimage. And while on it, he actually wrote the book, The Pilgrimage, and its follow-up or subsequent book being The Alchemist. Now, as we know, Brazil is a powerhouse in soccer or football, but times may be changing, so we'll see how they fare this year. Moving on to the second country in Group C, and that is going to be Morocco. Now, Morocco has been the new kid on the block. Last year, they had 4 years ago in the World Cup, they had numerous upsets. But for the author, and since we're talking about our literary World Cup, the author for Morocco is Tahar bin Jaloun, and his representative book is going to be The Sand Child. He has won, of course, numerous national awards, but not the Nobel Prize. But seeing that he has won numerous awards elected by his country, this is why he is the stand-in here. Apparently, he has a PhD in social psychology and is a major voice in post-colonial literature, and which is why he won a prize in 1987 known as the Prix Goncourt for La Nuit Sacrée. This is in French, apparently. I don't know how to pronounce that, but his works explore identity, migration, and the meeting of Arab and Western cultures. Like a lot of these post-colonial cultures that we're going to explore, they all have their own story, and apparently he was a major mouthpiece or literary champion of telling this story of Morocco. Actually, apparently he also won the Dublin Literary Award, which is interesting. Moving on to Haiti. Now, being in the U.S., Haiti's pretty close. It's in the Caribbean islands, so I actually know that Haiti was previously a French territory, and so their author's name is Danny Laforet. I have not heard of Danny Laforet, but apparently he is widely known in Haiti. He was born in Port-au-Prince in Haiti and worked as a journalist in Haiti before moving to Canada in 1976. Apparently he published his first novel, How to Make Love to a Negro Without Getting Tired, in 1985, and the novel was later adapted into a screenplay. He won the prestigious Prix Médicis in 2009, and upon receiving this prize, he commented on its ability to open up a new readership in France. Anyway, I could be way off the mark here, so do let me know if you're from Haiti or know Haitian culture and live in the United States, maybe a Haitian author that you visit a lot or that you would advocate for making this list. Moving on to Scotland. But before doing so, I just want to take a quick second to pause and again revisit the topic that these are only the 48 countries that are in the World Cup. So for example, Scotland and England you'll see on this list, but we're not going to see Ireland. And you know, if Ireland was on the list, we would have like a James Joyce or maybe a Claire Keegan if we were going with contemporary authors. But again, we're just following the script of who is actually presently in the 2026 FIFA World Cup. All right, so moving on to our final electee for Group 4, which is Scotland. This feels like it could be a large debate because this author is from way back. We're talking 18th century here. So let me know your thoughts, but I selected Robert Burns. Robert Burns is known mostly for his verse celebrating rural life, love, and liberty. Apparently he was born in 1759. Apparently his famous works are Tam O'Shanter, A Man's a Man for that, and Scots Whay. His legacy is the annual Burns Night celebrations, which honor his life and poetry. Every January 25th, this happens. I suppose if there is an honorary night for this person, it must be pretty big. It reminds me of like MLK Day, for example, in the United States. Okay, actually, real quick, we're just gonna next that. I know I just said all that, but I had a second thought, and it sounds more like he is a writer or a songwriter. So we're gonna do Robert Louis Stevenson, because I actually know this author selfishly, and I'm sure a lot more of you know him. He is known for his works Treasure Island and The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And as a young man, he mixed in London literary circles. So we're going to do that for Scotland. I just made an audible mid-video, so do forgive me, but let me know if you think this was a noble or worthwhile move if you were a Scot. All right, that's it for Group C. We're about to move on to Group D. And for Group D, to kick this one off, we are going to be talking about the United States. There are so many Nobel Prize winners in the United States, and could be a whole different video, I think. But go ahead and crush me in the comments if you want. I have elected John Steinbeck. One, because it is the book club's current read. We're reading The Grapes of Wrath. Go ahead and check that out in the comments below if you're looking for a book club. The other ones that came to mind, of course, were William Faulkner or Toni Morrison or Ernest Hemingway. I'm trying to think. There are so many. I think there are like 11 or 12 Nobel Prize winners in the United States. But because I'm currently reading John Steinbeck, and he has been one of my more favorite authors this year, I'm going to be biased because this is my video. John Steinbeck is mostly known for his florid writing style and the way that he paints a landscape in his prose. He lived in California, and so a lot of his writing is about the struggle of migrant workers moving west during either the Dust Bowl or the Great Depression, and kind of following these stories of hardened workers, and is just a really well-regarded and well-known author in the United States. If you think of Mice and Men or East of Eden or our book club's current read, The Grapes of Wrath, I mean, these are all books that are pretty well known even if you're not into reading. So that is why I've selected John Steinbeck. He also won the Nobel Prize, like I said. I think he won in 64, was it? When did he win? No, he won the Nobel Prize in 1962 and won the Pulitzer Prize in 1940 for The Grapes of Wrath. Again, final plug, if you are looking for a book club or just want to support all the effort that goes into this video, the Patreon is linked below. So if you want to show your support or hop into a book club, feel free to check that out. I think some of the themes that I really like is John Steinbeck. Looking at him from the surface, he looks like a man's man, but he really articulates in a lot of his books the social injustices, not only to Black people during that time, but also to women. Like, I just read a tiny anecdote in here where a former preacher, as his family is about to be migrating west, comes into the kitchen to help the woman of the house, and the woman's like, "What are you doing? This is woman's work." And he's like, "It's work. We don't have to make that distinction." And I think as an author, writing this book in 1939 and recognizing there shouldn't be this disparaging notion about what's what, and we can all be on an even playing field, was pretty progressive, certainly for this novelist to write. That's the last I'll speak on Steinbeck, but I figured the soundbite for the United States, most of you are probably from the United States watching this, so I just wanted to make it a little lengthier. Moving on. All right. For Australia, which is our second country in Group D, is going to be Patrick White. This man won the Nobel Prize in 1973. So again, going back to Nobel Prize winners, that's why he's on the list here. Some of his notable works are The Tree of Man, Voss, Riders in the Chariot, and The Eye of the Storm. I've actually not heard of him. I think in the analytics I looked before, we have a fair amount of Australians who tune into this channel. So if you are from Australia, let me know. Got an alarm going off. With that alarm, it's going to take so long to edit. So if you appreciate this thought experiment, go ahead and drop us a like. Why not? All right, that has stopped. Moving on. So apparently 2 of his novels in the 1950s, Tree of Man and Voss, both noted the blending of myth, mysticism, and psychological depth with vivid Australian settings. Seems like mostly why this man is considered an Australian stand-in is because he writes mostly about great Australian emptiness. And what I mean by this is kind of a spiritual yearning, and he writes about exploring themes like isolation and the quest of meaning, fusing this stream of consciousness, but also battling with his identity in Christian theology. Going back to an earlier mention, James Joyce, because Ireland is not on here, we won't talk about it too long, but this man was largely influenced by James Joyce. Moving on. Third country in Group D is going to be Paraguay, and Paraguay actually just played the United States last night, or maybe the night before. What is it, Sunday? So yeah, they played the United States Friday to kick off the United States first game, and the United States had a great showing. I'm sorry about it, Paraguay, but for this video, Paraguay's stand-in representative that we are going to elect is Augusto Raul Bastos. I had not heard of this man prior to doing this research here, but after reading a little bit about him, I would be super pumped to see a comeback from Paraguay so that they make the initial cut of the 32 teams moving forward, because Some of his writings certainly seem interesting, and I may even explore them just because we're creating this video, and that's the intention here, is to open our eyes to all the great authors in the world. Not only did he also win the Cervantes Prize, which is the highest literary honor for the Spanish language or Spanish written novel. I think one of the interesting parts of this man's story that makes me want to delve deeper into him is that he was actually exiled from Paraguay. Apparently there was this authoritarian dictatorship style government in Paraguay, and so due to him unveiling these injustices, he had to leave to go to Buenos Aires in Argentina so that he could publish these works. He supported himself through journalism. Basically, under oppression and suffering, he wrote Yo el Supremo, which is I am supreme in Spanish, which is a portrait of 19th century dictator Jose Gaspar Rodriguez de França, who became a cornerstone of the Latin American boom and a prototype of the dictator novel. Moving on to our final of Group D, and that is going to be Turkey. Now for Turkey, our stand-in is going to be Orhan Pamuk. Orhan Pamuk, I feel like I might have heard of, but because I'm not sure, we're just going to say no. Again, let me know your tally here, but his notable works are My Name is Red, Snow, and The Museum of Innocence. Pamuk actually did win the Nobel Prize in 2006, which is why he's making this list. He's widely regarded for exploring East and West tensions, identity, and the intertwining of Ottoman history and modern Istanbul. Seems like a lot of his works are talking about the affluency, but also the control that the Ottoman Empire had and how the Western civilization had a large impact on that, and how people living in said lands were impacted by that. Oh, interesting. If you don't know, Iowa has a fantastic writer's workshop, and apparently he was a visiting scholar for the University of Iowa. But largely, his legacy is that he is just the most notorious or most recognized Turkish author. All right, so that's going to round us out for Group D. We have next Group E. Now, Group E is going to be comprised of some heavy hitters and some countries not as well known. Like if you held up a world map in front of me, I would not be able to pin where they are located. So I'm interested to see if that is the case for you as well. Group E, we're going to be starting off with Germany. Now, of course, this is a big country that we've heard of, and so there will be, I imagine, some debate as to whether or not this is the best author from Germany, but we have selected, hopefully I'm saying this right, Jenta Gries, I think is how you say it, Jenta Gries, or Jenta Gries, maybe. I can't speak German, but that's my best attempt. And he is elected here because, well, one, he won the Nobel Prize in 1999, but also a lot of these works, I feel like, if you're in the reading space, you've come across. So some of his notable works are The Ten Drum, Cat and Mouse, Dog Years, and Peeling the Onion. Apparently his fiction is rich in irony and confronts Nazi Germany and the moral complexities of its recovery. He's often called the conscious of his generation because he used fiction and art to confront memory, guilt, and national identity. Okay, moving on. Our second country. This is one of those countries, honestly, not proud that my geography is this bad, but Curaçao, however you say it, I did not know this was even a country, so I am sorry for my ignorance here, but again, that's why we're doing this, for education. So Curaçao, after researching, I came up with Frank Martinez Arion, and Frank Martinez Arion won a couple of pretty notable awards, and so seems like that was one of the reasons. Definitely not the Nobel, but still a recognized author. Seems like he's known for magnifying the racial inequality in the Caribbean society. One of his works Double Spell in 1973 is set over one Sunday domino game, and it became the first major Dutch language novel told entirely from a black Curaçao viewpoint and remains his most acclaimed work. I'm sure there are a lot of social intricacies there that I don't understand, but just wanted to highlight this man and his work. All right, moving on. Our third is going to be Ivory Coast. In Ivory Coast, we have Amadou Karouma. And Amadou Karouma won a few French awards, it seems, blending oral traditions with inventive French narratives. He explored the legacies of colonialism as well, post-independence disillusionment, and the moral crisis of modern Africa. And yeah, he talks mostly about African critiques and failures of post-colonial governance. He's regarded as a warrior bard. It's said in French, the guerrier graut, and is celebrated for revitalizing African narrative form. All right, and our final one in Group E here is going to be Jorge Icaza for Ecuador. Now, Jorge Icaza was an Ecuadorian not only novelist, but playwright and diplomat, best known for his social realism. Apparently, his seminal novel, Juosipungo, gosh, my Spanish is awful, exposed the brutal exploitation of indigenous laborers in the Ecuadorian highlands and became one of Latin America's most influential works. It says raised partly on family hacienda after his father's death, Icaza witnessed the oppression of indigenous peasants. Juosipungo, which is the narrative that shapes or is telling this injustice, says, though attacked by elites as propaganda, the novel's stark realism won enduring acclaim. And later works such as Cholos deepened his study of identity, poverty, and social transition. It seems like this man is a monolith or just a super notorious and well-regarded Ecuadorian, and one that I'm actually really intrigued to look into. So I hope that you are as well. It says in the 1970s, he represented Ecuador as ambassador to Peru and even the Soviet Union, and his dual career reflected a belief that art and public service could both challenge injustice. Wow, I'm gonna go ahead and add that one. And also, I'm about to take a break because it has been so long. So you'll probably see me in some different clothes here soon, but this is gonna be an intermission. If you have made it this far, consider pausing the video, coming back to it. It's totally cool. This is a marathon, not a sprint, as the World Cup is an enduring event. If you have made it this far, maybe subscribe if you like book content like I was talking about, or like we're talking about here. But also, if you need a break, that's totally cool. Hop off the internet, go for a walk. I'll see you back here in a bit. All right, and we are resuming now. So, golly, there's still so many countries to go. All right, diving back in. Group F, we're going to try to speed this up a little bit. For the Netherlands, I have Harry Mulisch, and Harry Mulisch was a Dutch novelist. Seems like he wrote about metaphysical aftermath of World War II. He achieved both critical acclaim and broad readership for fiction that blends myth, philosophy, and historical trauma. His literary career, fuses theology, science, and myth in a quest narrative about humanity's lost covenant with God. His Austrian father, who collaborated with the Nazis, and a Jewish mother whose relatives died in concentration camps, placed him at the moral crossroads of the war. Wow, this is really interesting about this author. It says his parents, who was an Austrian father, and his mother, who was a Jewish mother, placed him at a moral crossroads of the war, because he later declared, "I am the Second World War," encapsulating how his survival and divided loyalties shaped his lifelong exploration of guilt, responsibility, and redemption. What a wild thing to imagine, having a father who collaborated with the Nazi regime, but then having a mother that was Jewish. I have a hard time believing. Let's see, Netherlands, Nobel Prize. Is that right? Yeah, no no author from Netherlands has won the Nobel Prize. See, I find this fascinating because there are countries that have just supremely more representation or more winning authors than others, and I think that just kind of, I feel like, shows bias or maybe favoritism towards some countries over others, and typically that's due to resources. But I think of the Netherlands as, a country that is economically or GDP-wise doing pretty well. So, wow. Okay, moving on to Japan. This is where I wanted it to be Ishiguro, but so many people say Ishiguro isn't really like, like his nationality. Though he was born in Japan, he considers himself English because he moved there whenever he was 5, which means his impressionistic years were largely influenced by England. So we have Haruki Murakami, and I had read one of his works, but it was only one of his nonfictions, so it's like not even in his typical composed works. He writes about dreamlike narratives that have reshaped global perceptions of contemporary Japanese literature. A lot of his works, I'm sure you've heard of. He is an extremely famous author. We're talking about Norwegian Wood, Kafka on the Shore, The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, IQ 84. His major awards include Franz Kafka Prize, the Jerusalem Prize, Hans Christian Andersen Literature Award. Has he not won the Nobel Prize? No. Okay. Moving on. Early life. He is the son of Japanese literature teachers who encouraged reading. Plays a part. It says, as a youth, he immersed himself in American jazz and fiction by authors such as Raymond Chandler, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Kurt Vonnegut. He's a Kurt Vonnegut fan. Interesting. Though sometimes viewed by Japanese literary circles as un-Japanese, he remains a leading figure of postmodern literature. Haruki Murakami, I've heard a lot of people detest the way that he writes about women, and so, yeah, take this with what you will. Moving on, Sweden, we have Selma Lagerlöf. Selma Lagerlöf was a Swedish novelist, short story writer, and the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. Let's go ahead and add this to the did not know but also want to read list. She won back in 1909. Pretty old, a long time ago. It says a childhood hip injury left her partially lame, fostering a quiet, book-filled youth steeped in oral storytelling. Encouraged by teachers and early mentors, she trained at a teacher's college in Stockholm and began teaching at a girls' school in 1885. It says some of her major works include Jerusalem, which was written in 1901. It says that she also used the prize money to repurchase Marbacka, which remains a museum. So beyond literature, she championed women's rights and humanitarian causes, notably aiding Jewish refugees in 1930s. Her fusion of folklore and ethical vision secured her a place as a foundational figure in Sweden and the world literature. All right, moving on to our last one in Group F, which is Tunisia. In Tunisia, I have Abdel Wahab Medab. His seminal essay diagnoses Islamist extremism as a distortion of the faith's humanistic legacy, while later works like Sortir de la Malédiction and Printemps de Tunis linked reform of Islamic culture to democratic renewal. He re-examined Islam's intellectual heritage to promote tolerance, aesthetic refinement without dogma. So that's it for Group F. Moving on to Group G. Group G, we're going to rattle through these. We have Maurice Maeterlinck. Let's go ahead and chalk that up as one that I definitely do not know. Maurice, I don't know about you, but you won the Nobel Prize in 1911. His works remain landmarks of European symbolism, notable for their poetic vision of humanity's encounter with mystery. That is for Belgium. He won the Nobel Prize, so he rose the ranks. It says major works include The Bluebird and Life of B. Moving on to Egypt, I have Naguib Mahfouz. I've actually heard of this guy. Notable works include the Cairo trilogy, Children of the Alley. He was raised in Cairo and was the youngest of 7 children in a middle-class Muslim family. He studied philosophy and graduated in 1934. It says his controversial allegory, Children of the Alley, was banned in Egypt for decades over perceived blasphemy. His writing evolved from social realism to philosophical and allegorical modes, reflecting both his exposure to Western literature and his enduring interest in faith, fate, and moral order. It says that until his death in 2006, he remained a moral and cultural touchstone in Egypt, and his influence endures through the annual Naguib Mahfouz Medal for Literature and the many film adaptations of his works. Oh, okay. This is making sense. I just read that he is the only Nobel Prize winner to win out of Egypt, and so that's probably why I've heard of him. Anyway, shout out Egypt for, for example, the Netherlands didn't have one, but Egypt did. And all right, moving on to Iran. And Iran, obviously, there are a lot of geopolitical issues right now between the U.S. and Iran, and going back to the World Cup. I think that's why events like this are beautiful. We are putting aside the bullshit or the calamity of the world and just bringing together everyone under the humanity of playing a game and being able to be friendly to one another. I think sports, superfluous or not really having meaning, or, they seem like you could do without them at a lot of times. But I think sports are one of the times that it can really bring people with other ideals together under one roof. So again, shout out to the World Cup, and we'll just go ahead and dive in here. So I have, probably butchering this, I'm sorry, but I have Sadegh Hadayat, and his notable work is The Blind Owl. I definitely want to read this just, again, due to the calamity right now, and to try to have some perspective from someone born across the globe. But it said he was born into an aristocratic family tied to Iran's Qajar elite. It says, while abroad, Kafka and Dostoevsky profoundly shaped his worldview, and he abandoned engineering for literature, later publishing his first collected Buried Alive after returning back to Iran. This is his final years and his legacy. It says, suffering from depression, he moved permanently back to Paris in 1950, where he ended his life. His work, censored at times in Iran, continues to influence Persian and world literature. It says The Blind Owl has been translated into more than 30 languages. So I'm definitely adding The Blind Owl to my list of reads. Moving on to the last in Group G is going to be New Zealand, and I have Catherine Mansfield here. Her psychologically rich impressionistic fiction placed her among early 20th century innovators, such as Virginia Woolf. She's most known for In a German Pension and Bliss and Other Stories, and The Garden Party and Other Stories. If we have any New Zealanders, or maybe people who have immigrated from New Zealand to the U.S. that are watching this, do let me know if you have heard of Catherine Mansfield. I truly don't know anything about her, but that's what we got. All right, moving on. We talked about earlier an author that received the Cervantes Award, and I believe that was Paraguay's author. I'm giving a little hint here, but Group H is going to include, to start, it's going to include Spain, and that's Miguel de Cervantes is who we have as the representative here. We don't have to talk about Cervantes too long. He's probably one of the oldest people in this group, or most historically dated people. He wrote Don Quixote, which is a seminal work that has helped establish the modern novel. It says he died in 1616 and reportedly one day before William Shakespeare, symbolically linking two literary people forever. It says his influence endures across centuries of European and global narrative art. Yeah. We don't have to talk about him too long. I definitely want to read Don Quixote, and if Spain advances as they are expected to, if they finish as the winner, we could be reading Don Quixote at the end of the year. We'll see. I mean, as a booktube page, as a booktube person, a talker of books, we should be reading Don Quixote at some point. All right, moving on to Cabo Verde. What is Cabo Verde? I've never even heard of them. That's just my ignorance for sure. Cabo Verde is a tiny island nation off the west coast of Africa. It is roughly 310 miles away from Senegal. The country is making its historic first appearance in the World Cup. Okay, there you go. But we have Germano Almeida. He's a writer and a lawyer. He's still currently alive. His fiction blends irony, humor, and social critique about the modern Cape Verdean identity. Almeida's works often feature characters negotiating the tension between traditional values and modernization. Depiction of island life as central to his literary appeal. Yeah, I know nothing about Cape Verde, so I think it could actually be interesting. It looks beautiful. All right, moving on. Saudi Arabia. I have Raja Al Sania. She was born in 1981 and is a Saudi Arabian novelist, is best known for her controversial debut, Girls of Riyadh. I've definitely heard of this work. Apparently, she was nominated for the Nobel Prize of Literature and has won the International Dublin Literary Award. And Forbes has recognized her as one of the Middle East 40 most influential Arabs under 40. It says her work, Girls of Riyadh, I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong, was originally published in Lebanon to avoid Saudi censorship. It uses an epistolary format of weekly emails from an anonymous narrator recounting the romantic and social lives of 4 affluent Saudi women. It says the novel was initially banned in Saudi Arabia, but became a bestseller across the Arab world and beyond. It says critics often describe it as an Arabic Sex in the City, while scholars see it as a groundbreaking exploration of female voice, identity, and modernization in Gulf society. Very cool. Moving on, Group H, Uruguay. We have Mario Benedetti. Mario Benedetti was a Uruguayan poet, novelist, essayist, and journalist, as a leading figure of Uruguay's generation of 1945 as he chronicled the urban middle class with empathy, irony, and blending social critique with intimate emotion. Notable works, La Truga, Gracias por el Fuego, and Monte Vidianos. He was known for political engagement and exile. It says after 1973 Uruguayan military coup, his political stance forced him into exile in Argentina, Cuba, and Spain. That's interesting that Uruguay, as did the Paraguay author, both were exiled to Argentina at some point. Just find that interesting, and it seems like this fracturing and writing about these inequalities and repressions forced these authors to move countries, and so I want to learn more about that. Both Paraguay and Uruguay's authors. Seems like his core themes were about love, justice, and the everyday. Moving on to Group I, France. This was a hard one, definitely a hard one here. I feel like it could have been so many other authors, but I had to do it. I went with Victor Hugo. I mean, Due to les Miserables, Due to Les Mis and Notre Dame, or Notre Dame, I had to put Victor Hugo in here for France. I'm not going to talk about this too much. These are both epic stories that I have still yet to read, and so selfishly, if France, as they're expected, goes to the finals, I will be reading some Hugo this year. Do let me know what you think if you are following the World Cup, if you think France has got it. I think they're probably the leading contender. Anyway, moving on. Senegal. I have Senegal, Leopold Sédar Senghor. I've never heard of him. He was elected in 1983. It says in 1935 he became the first African to earn the aggregation in grammar, the highest qualification for teaching in France. His wartime captivity during World War II deepened his poetic reflection on race, suffering, and dignity. He's celebrated for both his literary and political achievements. Moving on to Iraq, we have Sinan Antoun. I believe he's actually a professor at NYU. I think I've heard of this guy. Occupation, he's an associate professor at NYU. Antoun's fiction and poetry confront the personal cost of Iraq's recent history. His debut novel, Ijam, portrayed his life under dictatorship through the allegory of a prisoner's manuscript. The Corpse Washer, which he translated himself into English, follows an artist drawn back into his family's ritual work of preparing the dead. It was shortlisted for major translation prizes and praised for its humanist lens of post-war Baghdad. Golly, this gives me chills. The Book of Collateral Damage catalogs the material and emotional losses caused by the 2003 invasion, extending his meditation on memory and ruin. Obviously, if you live in the U.S., you know about Baghdad, you know about the Iraqi war, and so this man being born in Baghdad and later moved to the U.S. and had a education at Georgetown and then later Harvard, I'm sure is able to depict a story so horrific and unreal to most. And so 100% I'm adding this man's works to my TBR. And if you have never heard of him but think that these stories are something that you'd like to explore, feel free to give this video a like and add those books to your list and consider purchasing them. I will drop them below here. Translated works, again, it's a theme that I wanna focus more on in the future. All right, Norway. I have John Fosse. Apparently he's still alive. He's one of Europe's most acclaimed contemporary authors. I should know this guy. He won in 2023, which was 3 years ago. He won the Nobel Prize, but I have not heard of him. Septology is one of his notable works, as is Melancholy 1 and 2, and Someone is Going to Come. It says his prose, including Melancholy 1 and 2 and the 7-part Septology, explores solitude, faith, and artistic creation through fluid punctuation, light narrative. Septology follows a painter named Azel in a metaphysical reflection on art, mortality, and divine presence. This is actually a recent winner of the Nobel Prize. I don't know how. Like looking at him, he looks familiar, but somehow I don't know this man. It seems like he won the year before Han Fang, however you say her name. Okay, moving on. We have 3 more groups here. We're gonna rapid fire because my throat's getting hoarse. All right. In this group, we have Argentina, Algeria, Austria, and Jordan. For Argentina, we have Jorge Luis Borges, or Borges, I think it's Borges. I've certainly heard of this man. I'm looking at the list over here, the only one that I have heard of. His major works is Ficciones and Otras Inquisiciones. I don't know that one. Anyway, he also won the Cervantes Prize. He's a professor, actually, at the University... Or wait, he's not alive, is he? No, he's not alive. He was a professor at the University of Buenos Aires, and he blends metaphysics and narrative paradox and global modernism. Certainly an author I've heard loads about and one I want to read. Moving on, Algeria, I have Assia Dejabar. She won the Peace Prize of German Trade. She's widely regarded one of North Africa's most influential literary voices. She explored colonialism as well, similar to some of the other African countries here. She became the first Algerian and Muslim woman admitted to some prestigious cabinet. So she adopted her pen name during the Algerian War of Independence when publishing her debut novel, La Soif. It says her work interrogated the intersection of language identity and female emancipation. It says writing in French, the colonizer's tongue, she sought to transform it into a language of freedom. Her recurring subjects include post-colonial memory, women's silenced histories, and the dialogue between Arab, Berber, and Western cultures. So yeah, if you're into those themes, definitely consider checking her out. Moving on, Austria, I have Elfriede Jelinek. She received the 2004 Nobel Prize for her works that expose social and linguistic power structures with distinctive musical and linguistic experimentation. It says her debut poetry collection, Lisa Schatten, was followed by the novel Wir sind Vogel Baby, and she gained wider attention. She says her legacy is a divisive yet central figure in European letters. Jelinek is regarded as one of the most significant German language authors of her era. She is largely influenced by feminist and avant-garde literature worldwide. Okay, moving on. Jordan, I have Ibrahim Nasrallah. Ibrahim Nasrallah is a Palestinian novelist and photographer, poet, painter, and photographer. This is celebrated for his sweeping literary portrayals of Palestinian history. He is one of the most translated and awarded Arabic authors of his generation. Currently still alive, major awards include the International Prize for Arabic Fiction. His magnum opus is the Palestinian Tragic Comedy and is a multi-volume fictional cycle tracing 250 years of Palestinian life in Palestine. This is probably a good entry. It says he had a novel in 2018. It's called The Second War of the Dog, which won the International Prize for Arabic Fiction in its dystopian critique of extremism. And that's going to be our ending of Group J with Ibrahim Nasrallah. If you're interested in Palestinian works, he might be a good entry point, and then you can kind of just look at him and do a branching of
people similar to him or in the same circles. Group K, this is our second to last group, guys. This has been a grueling marathon, but I'm stoked about it because of the expansiveness of authors that have otherwise just never entered into my view. And so I hope that you're getting something out of this as well. All right, in Group K, we are going to start off with Jose Saramago. This is Portugal's representative. He won the Nobel Prize, so this is why he is, taking this stance. Definitely heard of this guy. He won back in 1998. He actually passed away in 2010. Some of his major works are Baltasar and Limunga and The Gospel According to Jesus Christ, Blindness, and the Year of the Death of Ricardo Reis. Born into a family of landless peasants, Saramago grew up in poverty and left formal schooling early to train as a metalworker. His literary education came largely from nights spent reading at Lisbon's public libraries. This self-directed learning and his working-class roots shaped his empathy for ordinary people and his skepticism toward authority. This sounds so captivating, right up my alley. I come from a blue-collar family. My grandparents were super impoverished, so this just sounds like a good old dude here. His prose is marked by long flowing sentences, sparse punctuation, sounds kind of like Cormac, and a seamless blend of narration and dialogue, often within satirical or allegorical frameworks. Including blindness and death with interruptions, continue to influence writers worldwide. Yeah, go ahead and add this dude to the list. He's certainly climbing the ranks for me. All right, moving on. Colombia, guys. Do you know? Do I even have to say it? Colombia, we got Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and he actually passed away in 2014. Obviously, one of the most well-known authors in the world. I've still yet to read 100 Years of Solitude, but I do have it right here. Bang! There it is. So at some point, we're going to be reading that. His works have shaped literature through their blend of myth and realism. His other work that is talked about less, but obviously still well known, is Love in the Time of Cholera. He won the Nobel Prize back in 1982. He was raised by his maternal grandparents and absorbed family legends and local folklore. His grandfather, a retired colonel, and his grandmother, a storyteller steeped in superstition, profoundly influenced his sense of narrative. He studied law in Bogota, but left to pursue journalism, a profession that anchored his writing in political and social realities. Cool. I'm not going to talk too long about him. He's obviously already well loved and regarded, so we can move on to some of these lesser known authors to hopefully shine a light on some of them. All right, Uzbekistan. I have Hamid Ismailov. Hamid Ismailov is a Uzbek novelist. I actually didn't even know where Uzbekistan was until recently. I have a friend who's going into the Peace Corps, and he showed me on the map. But this is also a man that was exiled. He was exiled back in 1992 for his unacceptable democratic ideas. He became a leading literary voice for the region through his fiction and work with BBC World Service. He was a finalist for the Nobel, apparently. Notable works include The Railway, The Dead Lake, and The Underground. It says the railway captures Soviet-era life in small Uzbek town, while The Dead Lake addresses nuclear testings, exploring censorship and artistic renaissance. It says his 2025 novel, We Computers, a ghazal novel, was a finalist for the National Book Award in Translated Literature. Seems like this guy's at the precipice, or, is definitely front-facing right now. I don't think I could say that I knew who he was, though. This last one in Group K, honestly, I was having a really hard time finding one. I just want to be honest. Like, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, I was having a hard time finding information on this, along with all the other ones. Take it with a grain of salt. I did my best. For Congo, I have Alain Mabankou. He was born in the Republic of Congo and writes his books in French, People call him the African Beckett because his writing mixes deep thought with fun, silly humor. Currently, this guy actually teaches at UCLA in California, so he's kind of, a United States citizen at this point, but he's from Congo. He's won the big French book prize, the Prix Ranoudat. His book, Broken Glass, also was chosen as one of the 100 best books of the 21st century. And his global reach says you can find his translated books in 15 different languages. Some of his well-known books in English include Black Moses and African Psycho. This is Elaine, or Elan. I might be saying that completely wrong, but I couldn't find too much information. This is where I ended here. And speaking of ending, we have one more group here, guys. We are on the home stretch. And arguably, we left the biggest heavy hitter for the end, because in Group L, we have England, guys. In Group L, we have England, and we're talking about William Shakespeare. I don't need to dive too much into this. I think that it could be debated. A lot of people think that J.K. Rowling should stand in here for Shakespeare, but I think due to the works like Hamlet and Macbeth and King Lear and Romeo and Juliet, and how they are still some of the most regarded works and plays currently. I mean, we all know who this guy is, or guys, because as I'm sure a lot of you know, it's hard to pin down that Shakespeare was just one person. Like Homer, a lot of people think it was multiple people. So that's a fun fact for you. Apparently, he had somewhere around 40 plays and over 150 sonnets. He is the most enduring of the literary stature, and one that there's no top 100, top 10 of all time without Shakespeare. All right, moving on. Croatia, third to last here. Croatia, we have Miroslav Kraleza. He was a Croatian playwright, poet, and essayist, and influential in South Slavic writer. Notable works, I literally can't pronounce any of these. His monumental novel cycle, Zastave, portrays the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian world. And although often considered for the Nobel Prize, he never received it. But being that he was nominated, we had to put him on here. And this is Miroslav Kraleza. His early exposure to Nietzsche and European modernism drew him to literature and left-leaning politics. In World War I, service on the Eastern Front inspired his searing anti-war prose and poetry. Cool. All right, Ghana. For Ghana, we have Ama Ata Aidu. Some of her notable works include The Dilemma of a Ghost, Anoa, and Changes, a Love Story. For public service, she was actually appointed Ghana's Minister of Education in 1982, and Aidu resigned after realizing that she could not implement her vision of free universal education. So she later founded a foundation in 2000 to support African women writers. Through both activism and literature, she challenged Western stereotypes of African womanhood and promoted Pan-African feminist solidarity. Feel free to check her out if you're looking for some African feminist works. Rounding out Group L, we have Panama's Carlos Chang Marin. Chang Marin, it says he was honored with numerous national literary prizes and international distinctions from Cuba and Mexico, and he is largely celebrated as a Cutarista, which is a writer who is rooted in the people's life and language. Apparently, the Panamanian government established an award after him in 2008. He was that prolific in Panama. And his tales for children continue to be staples of Panama's educational and cultural heritage. I think I'll have to check out some of those children's stories, because if you are a fan here, you know that my wife and I are going to be having a boy here in a couple months. So it'd be fun to see how some of those cultural distinctions compare to some in the US. So that is rounding out our 48 countries. Holy cow. That was so many authors. If you are new here and like book content, feel free to like this video, maybe consider subscribing. And if you are looking for a book club, feel free to check that out below. And otherwise, let me know who you are pulling for in the World Cup. And as always, happy reading, and we'll catch you on the next video. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Oh my golly golly.